Welcome into the newest episode of Side Mission. I'm your host, as always, Rusty Ellis, joined by two of the boys today, Matt Beck, Alex Thacker, but we just call him Thacker. And we're talking about one of the most hyped up releases of the year, one of the most hyped up sequels, I think, of recent memory, and it's Horizon Forbidden West. And as somebody who I enjoyed Horizon Zero Dawn, I wasn't in love with that game like a lot of other people were. I didn't think that game was amazing. I thought that the gameplay was. I thought the story was very average.
Yeah,
Forbidden West, and I think we can all agree with this, Forbidden West is a nice change of pace from the two games we've talked about so far this year, being Pokemon
absolutely.
Legends and Dying Light 2, whereas both of those kind of had their issues, were fun at points, but had their issues. Pokemon Legends I kind of grew to like a little bit more as I played it more after the episode, but Dying Light 2, obviously, none of us really loved that game, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Uh,
not much changed. Not much changed for me. I haven't even touched it recently.
yeah, it's not even on my system anymore, so it got uninstalled as
Yeah, I've
soon
been
as I
noticed
was
that.
done. So, but Horizon Forbidden West, Matt, I'll start with you because I know you were probably the most excited of all of us about this game.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
I said multiple times when I was playing it that compared to those first two games we reviewed and we talked about, this was a very nice palate cleanser because in every way, shape, and form, I feel like this game not only met expectations but greatly exceeded them.
Oh, absolutely. This game pretty much for me is what started off this year's new next gen game that we have seen, and it has absolutely lived up to the build up to the hype for it for me, especially because it's been several years since the first one came out, which I believe was in 2017. So when this game finally came out, I was so excited to play it, and it definitely exceeded my expectations. I have been greatly enjoying it so much. A lot of the same mechanics are here. So for any fans from the first game, it's going to feel very familiar to you. It's just pick up the controller, you get started, and it's everything's very familiar. They introduce a lot of new, different concepts as well. Uh, the story here delves more into like the whole situation with what happened after like during the before the Zero Dawn incident occurred, and
Yeah,
you learning of these new characters that you found out about this group called Zenith,
the
which this
Zeniths,
actually,
yeah.
the Zenith, this really took me by surprise because I was not expecting to see this more futuristic aspect to Horizon Zero Dawn, which felt more like, it's so weird to say this, but it's like the way that the game is setting is, it's like it takes place in the future, but nothing really feels futuristic about it except for
Yeah.
anything that was involving the past. The past is what feels futuristic to you, whereas everything else feels like more like
Prehistoric. Like
prehistoric.
prehistoric, yeah,
Exactly,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. So seeing this increase like this new like look into that whole aspect is beautiful to see that, and it definitely expands upon the story, which to me in the very first game the story was a little kind of out there, but this introduces more sci-fi, which is definitely where the first game was heading, and this game is like the full realization of that. And um aloy Aloy has become one of my favorite PlayStation characters in recent memory, honestly. Like, this game has cemented her upon the PlayStation greats with like Nathan Drake, Kratos, Ratchet, Jack and Daxter, and all of them. And I love the fact that Aloy's finally getting the love that she deserves. And they really did a great job with her character in this game. Like, she feels very real. She doesn't feel like one dimensional like a lot of other video game characters protagonists do. Like, she went through so much in the first game, finding out the fact that she's the clone of this woman named Elizabeth Sobek, who was the basically the leader, the designer of Zero Dawn
Yep.
and Gaia, which you learn a lot about that in this game. It expands into more of that, which is fantastic to see.
So I have a weird stance on something. I thought about this a few days ago when I was just looking back on my time with this game. So here was my biggest criticism of Zero Dawn. And I think, Matt, you've probably heard me say this before.
Yeah,
Thacker, I don't know if you have, because I don't know if me and you have ever really talked about the first game before. I don't think we've talked about it very much. Uh,
no,
I think that Horizon Zero Dawn is a game that has 10 out of 10 gameplay with a 7 out of 10 story and 6 out of 10 characters. And
Hmm.
The only character I didn't have an issue with, or the only character that I really grew to care about in the first game was Aloy. And Aloy is a great character. I think that in this game, especially if I want to be nitpicky,
Yeah.
they have improved really everything from the first game in terms of the gameplay, in terms of the setting, the environment, the characters big time, and the story big time. I think the characters and the
Even the
story,
machine.
yeah, the machines and the designs of the machines as well. But the characters and the story specifically for me were the two biggest issues with the first game. I didn't really care about most of the characters, and I thought the story was okay. It was a little odd. I didn't really think that it flowed great at times, but I think that they definitely figured out where they wanted to go with the story in this game, and I praise them for that because knowing the direction you want to go in as a writer is massive. That is huge for the creative process. And they clearly knew where they wanted to go, and it tells because this story flows a whole lot better, and the characters are more well written as a byproduct of that as well.
Agreed.
I have to be honest. If there's anything in this game that took a step back, in my opinion, and this might be controversial, I do think it was Aloy. And the reason I say that is because I get that the whole point of her arc, and this is not just to disagree with Matt. This is something that I've thought about, and I've tried to find ways to word this properly. So
Yeah.
I'll do my best to kind of explain this, and I'll let Thacker kind of get into his thoughts about the story and the characters. But with Aloy, I know that there's supposed to be some kind of an arc of she starts out in the beginning and she believes that she's the only one that can do this, and she has to do it alone and can't do it with
Hmm.
any help. My problem is that dynamic persists for way too long. That dynamic is there for just about the entire game until
Yeah, I think you and I actually talked about that some.
yeah, like it's one of those where it's like, okay, at a certain point, I need to see growth, and I need to see when you've made all these allies, you've made all these friends along the way that are all here willing to help you. At a certain point, I need to see some growth a little bit earlier than we did. And now that's a nitpick. Again, I think Aloy is a fantastic character, and I think that I don't know who voices her off the top of my head, but whoever voices
The
her,
Halo,
yes, she is.
Ashley Birch.
Okay, I knew her name was Ashley. I didn't know. Okay, Ashley Birch. Fair enough. She does a fantastic job though as Aloy, and the voice acting throughout the entire game is fantastic. Again, miles better than Dying Light 2, where it sounded like everybody was phoning it in. But
For
but
real. And
with Aloy, and I'll let you go on Thacker from there. With Aloy, my thing is, if I had seen that kind of opening up a little bit earlier in the game, I would have said this game is an improvement on every single front. Now, that being said, that's a huge nitpick, and I don't think that really hurts what I think of the game. And Thacker, I think you would agree with that.
no, and I'd agree. Hands down. And like the voice acting in this in general was far better than we got with Zero Dawn. And three characters outside of Aloy that really just stuck even better were Varl, Silence, and Aaron. Like
Yeah.
you could really
Yeah.
tell the cast for them actually got so much better with this game. Like John Hopkins, who actually is the voice of Aaron, and John Macmillan, who is the voice of Varl, you could really tell that there was not only the connection in game, but you could tell that their friendship outside of the game reflected it in game as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just even Silence voice actor, who is, I don't know if you know this, but it's Lance Reddick.
Okay, I've heard the name before. Tell me what that's from.
So Lance Reddick, he's a bigger name for different games in general. You see him in John Wick.
Oh wow.
Okay.
Yeah, he's in all three John Wicks. He's in White House Down. Who else? Where else is he in? Godzilla versus King Kong. Actually,
Oh, okay, okay.
like if I showed you a picture of him, you guys would instantly recognize him.
Okay, so I'm just looking it up. So they actually used his likeness for Silence. Okay, I
Yeah,
got you.
that's the thing. They used the likeness for a lot of them as well.
Okay,
That's cool. I didn't know that.
I dig that.
And that's one thing when I found that out and actually dove a little bit deeper in on it, I was like, this is actually really interesting. And from that, you could see that they even brought that like love for each other out of game in the game as well, because you even see it where when you first meet Aaron, he's holding that grudge for Alo not saying goodbye from Zero Dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you could see he's holding that grudge and hear it in the voice and everything. Even with Varl's personal need to continuously help Aloy, even though she doesn't want it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can see that they're actually doing that, because coming back together from 5 years to making this game, there's that time missing where you don't really see each other, especially with COVID,
Mm-hmm.
that you could see the difference happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just brought the story even closer to being one of the great games of this year.
Yeah, I think where characters were the weak point of the first game for me, I think they really were the carrying point of this game, and that says a lot considering how good the gameplay is as well. The gameplay is fantastic, just as good as the first game, if not better. And I truly mean that. I don't know how the first game's gameplay got better, but it somehow did in this game. With just the bow combat, the max being able to knock off weak points. I know Thacker got obsessed with that during several side missions I watched him do, but
Hey, it was one of those. I enjoyed upgrading my gear better.
yeah, like if you felt like you had more purpose to doing stuff like that, and I think that's for an open world game, it's very easy nowadays for open world games to kind of hit that repetitive feeling and to kind of have that, okay, I've been here before, I've been there, done that, I've seen this before, this is nothing new. Well, for an open world game to feel as fresh as this one did, and I think for the most part it does feel fresh, I think that's pretty outstanding. And I know that there's another big open world game that hint hint just came out recently, and we're going to talk about that here soon. But this game really does make open world feel fresh in just how it plays, how you travel, and I think that that's one thing they also improved on the first game is how you get around. I mean, Matt, we were talking about it. You remember in the first game how you had to fast travel in this game? You had to have fast travel kits, dude, and it sucked.
Yes.
Now you just find a bonfire and you fast travel from that. It's a whole lot easier. Like
you still have them, but that's not when you're like out.
But they're not your lone. But they're not your lone. They're not your lone way to do it. I mean, bonfires are so like there's more bonfires in this than there were in Dark Souls 3. And Dark Souls 3 had quite a few bonfires. If you don't know, had quite a few bonfires. Fuck the bingo card. Anyways, so I think that there's quality of life improvements. The settings, Matt. That's what me and you also wanted to talk about. The settings. Because the settings, where they were really good in Zero Dawn, I feel like the settings really steal the show in this game.
Yeah, the environments in this game are absolutely beautiful, and it really does take advantage of the PlayStation 5's hardware, which I'm very pleasantly surprised considering that this is a cross-gen game, which I know a lot of people were disappointed about when it was first announced that this was also going to be on the PlayStation 4, and a lot of people thought that the game was going to be affected by like the PlayStation 5 version of the game, but that's not true at all. They right before the release of the game, they actually did demonstrate quite a few videos of the PlayStation 4 version of the game, which is not it's not anything to not look away at. Like the game is beautiful regardless of what system you're playing it on. And my least favorite areas being like snow areas because there was just so much of that in the first game. But they, I didn't have much of a complaint about it here because, like I said, the game is just so realistically realized. It's so beautiful to look at, and there's even these areas like I just did here recently where you're in Las Vegas, but it's like everything's underwater, which was so cool to see that, especially once you get the breathing mask, so you're able to dive underwater and stay under there longer. And this whole area that you're exploring, which is just casinos and all of that, which you see Las Vegas now just like imagine if Las Vegas became Atlantis.
That whole section's fucking crazy.
They just did so much stuff here in this game like that I would have loved to have seen in the first game, and it still just sticks to its roots. There's still very familiar areas, grassy areas. I would have really have liked to have seen something that involved you going into like a sky village with you're up in the trees and everything like that, which would have been cool to see. But a couple of other areas that I really took interest in was Plainsong. When you got there, it was beautiful. Like it was just like houses, huts made out of bamboo. Um, the Ataru, which are the locals of the area, I
Hmm.
love their whole like the outfit designs that they have. And then you have the tribes, the Tanakh. Each have their own different like painting on them because it's their tribes and they follow that whole thing, and they each have like their own unique aspects to it. Like the Tanakh are just these
Kind of,
warriors,
kind of
and
savages, yeah. Kind of savages,
absolutely.
yeah.
And there's this whole misunderstanding about them that you even hear the character Aaron say, which is like, they'll suck your blood out and type things like that. But as you're discovering the tribes, it's like you're realizing these are like fully realized characters. Like these tribes, they have like different characteristics. There's one in general that I remember, which was actually one of my favorite storylines in the game, where you go up to this giant wall that I think was called the Bulwark, and the main tribe leader of there, he's basically huffing and puffing his chest about
Is this the one where you bring it
oh,
down? Yeah, where you bring the wall
exactly,
down?
yep.
Yeah, that was awesome. I agree. Continue.
Hmm.
Go ahead.
And it was just, I love the fact that you're just like, you know what, I'm going to basically bring this guy down a few notches. Like Aloy discovers that the giant boulders that are creating the defense around the area, it's very impenetrable because they're always like saying, you can't bring this wall down. We're untouchable. And then Aloy proves them wrong, which actually leads into one of my very favorite quests in this game because you're with the marshal of the Sky Clan. I'm trying to remember what his name was, but this is where you actually end up encountering one of the probably best machines fights I have ever experienced in this series, which was this giant mammoth sized machine.
Yep.
That fight was absolutely
The Tremor
incredible.
Tusk.
Yeah, exactly. Um, that whole section was so incredible fighting him for the first time. I'm not gonna lie, I died a few times here, and honestly, just the machines in this game in general, like matching their environments is perfect. Like in the area when you're underwater in Vegas, you basically fight this Loch Ness monster, which that was a really fun fight.
That shit was terrifying.
I know. I was
That shit was
honestly,
terrifying.
when you went underwater, I was honestly nervous about having to do like underwater fighting. But when Ella was like, "I can't fight these things underwater," I was like, "Oh, thank God!" Because no matter what game I have played, underwater combat has never been done right. But
Facts.
I was not expecting it to be done in this game either. So when you drained the water and you fought it on land, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Now I can actually do this fight. And then also seeing familiars like the Thunderjaw, which still strikes fear to me
Hmm.
every time I see one. I
Yeah.
literally killed my
I
first one
don't.
by
I don't
hiding
even
behind a
trust
rock.
that thing.
Yeah.
Well, I
That
thought,
thing.
See,
oh,
Thacker,
I thought,
Thacker. I was gonna,
I don't even want y'all to mention that.
I was gonna go to Thacker next with that because I know that was one of his favorite side missions was going up against a Thunderjaw that he was like 5 levels too weak for, and
yeah,
he
I'll just
But
say this.
I looked back at it, my dude. I was not 5 levels. I was 15.
it was 15 and you were 10. Calm down. You're not. We're not gonna have that energy here. It was a level 15. You were a level 10. Chill out. You still got your ass whipped. Anyways, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
I got
when
that
I
thing torn apart.
You did. You did. Now you did end up killing it, and I will say the persistence was impressive because at a certain point I would have said fuck it.
I'll
No,
say
you're not
this.
thinking the Thunderjaw. You're thinking the turtle thing.
Oh, same
Oh my
thing.
gosh.
Turtle, alligator. They're all the same.
Um,
As we say in journalism, close enough.
I'll,
But
I'll finish. I'll finish off with this. I cheesed the hell out of the Thunderjaw by hiding behind a rock and then running around and then shooting off its parts. So that's how I killed my first one in the
oh, you
game.
played like a bitch then. You played like a bitch. I don't like that. I'm just kidding. No, you got to do whatever you got to do. No, the machines definitely are also part of the combat. Honestly, is what shines in this game the most, and there's so much in this game that does shine. But the combat really does take, in my opinion, again, just the front seat here because it was already almost perfect in the first game, and it feels so tight and pinpoint and accurate. And I don't think there was ever really many moments. I mean, I don't, at least not to my immediate memory, where I looked back and like I died and said, "Oh, that's bullshit." Like most of the time, if I died or if I failed a mission, I typically knew why it happened. And I think that in a game like this, where the combat is so prevalent, I feel like that's important. Thacker, I know you loved the side missions. That's kind of a good little segue from about the Thunderjaw and whatever the fuck the turtle was into that. Uh, but I know that you spent a lot of time on the side missions before you got really going on the story. Talk about those, because I think what a lot of people need to know about this game is that not only is the story really good, but there's also a lot of quality side content when you're not doing main story missions.
You're not wrong at all. The side missions, it actually feels like you're making a difference with the story. Even though, yes, a lot of the side missions don't impact the main story at all, at the same time, you feel like you're actually helping Aloy make a difference in the game, in the world, and everything by helping out doing these little quests that could be as simple as just, hey, research what's going on with this because somebody's fucking everything up.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things. It just feels nice to actually have that in a game, especially when it comes to not only the reward system, which most of the time it's either metal scraps, which if you don't know by now, that's your money system. But at the same time, you also get the nice dialogue. You get their own little story for these side missions. It's not just as we saw in Dying Light fetch quests and everything. It's more of, hey, you want to start this side mission? Cool, go for it. And then while you're doing that, you get your own cutscenes, dialogue, everything, to where it actually feels like it's supposed to be part of the story. And it's just one of those things that brings a nice change of pace to the story. It brings a nice, relaxing part to, instead of you wanting to just blast through the story and finish it in the allotted time that they say it takes, which was what, 20 hours?
So I think it's 25 to 30 was what they said an average playthrough would take. But I mean, I took 19 and I kind of rushed through a lot of the story stuff. So it's one of those. It kind of depends on the player.
And at the same time, if you do the side missions and you want to actually take the time with the game, and with that, you've got to research where did the Razorbacks come from. You've got to figure out where, like, why work has stopped, and all of this. And when you finally finish it, they end up kicking the guy completely out of there.
Yep.
Yeah,
They
that was
kicked
great
him
to watch,
completely
actually.
out of Chain Crate, and they're like, "No, fuck you. We don't want you here. We don't need you. Fuck your decree. Fuck all of this. You can fucking leave." And the new person in charge ends up being a buddy of yours from
The first
Zero
game.
Dawn, being Petra.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, again, it's not part of the main story. You can blow past it, not even worry about it. But actually being able to do that and see a familiar face from Zero Dawn, such as Petra, come to light and actually get her own responsibilities was beautiful.
Actually, something I would like to point out is if you do certain like character-based side quests, there's actually different dialogue in certain cities that you'll encounter depending on like exactly what quest you did, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, like for real. The other nice thing is it's not really a side mission or side quest, but it's character dialogue. With some of these major characters, your choices matter on the dialogue that you get. Like when you first say hi to, like, find Aaron and everything, at the end of the conversation, you have a choice between three things, which is an option between like logical, emotional, and I can't remember what the third one was.
It's kind of like distant. It's something like that. I don't remember what exactly the phrasing is of it, but it's like logical, emotional, and then the last one is like kind of like a distant answer.
Which is
Exactly.
Aloy being Aloy.
Pretty much. And the thing is, depending on your answer, kind of relates to how these characters react with Aloy.
Mm-hmm.
So you could essentially, and this is mind blowing, the fact that you could do this. Essentially, you can take Aaron's grudge and pretty much just make it disappear.
Yeah.
With your decisions of how you want to have a conversation with them. And it's just side missions, one of those that I know some people don't enjoy them. I enjoyed the fuck out of the side missions on this game 100,000% more than I did the last game we reviewed.
Yeah, I think that in open world games, that's the important thing here is that in open world games, you need riveting side content in addition to that story content. And I think that there are people that focus just on story, whereas there's people that explore more, but you've got to be able to cater to both. And I think this game does that very, very well. So the last thing I'm going to ask us to do here is I want us to nitpick a little bit. What's the
Okay.
biggest gripe you can come up with this game? Matt, we can start with you. What's the biggest kind of gripe you come up with the game? There's one thing that kind of bugged you. What was it?
So to this day, and this is also from the first game that also bugged me is too, are when you take over outposts. I do not enjoy fighting human AI in this game. I know they definitely improved on the melee combat system. They added different combos, different techniques, which you can expand upon that if you do like pit training. So I was happy to see that, but it's still to me it's just not enjoyable fighting humans. But luckily, during a lot of those fights, you do get to fight machines, and that's really the bread and butter for me of this game series are the machines, which I feel like are the stars of the game. Um, but yeah, fighting outposts, taking out the enemies, just it's not fun for me. I much prefer um, skipping those at most, but unfortunately, as kind of a completionist of kind of these open world games like this, I do them. But it's probably my biggest gripe on the game.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. That like I don't know if it's not my biggest gripe, but I will say if there's any point where the combat does kind of falter, human enemies, and again it was the same in the first game, so that maybe that is one thing they didn't improve. It's just not fun because also for the most part with human enemies, especially if you stay in stealth, there's no real nuance to the combat. You get a headshot, you pretty much get a one shot kill.
Yep.
So there's not really a lot of nuance to the combat there. Again, it's just a gripe. That's what I asked you to do is just kind of nitpick a little bit. So it's not a deal breaker. The game is still fantastic. But that is something that I look at and I say, yeah, that maybe a little bit less of that, a little bit more of the mech combat. That's just kind of the way I would look at it. Thacker, what about you? What's a nitpick you have with this game?
To be honest with you, on this game, I only had two real big nitpicks, and one of them's not even that big. The one that's not that big is, I'm sorry, I get it, but at the same time, Aloy's lone wolf attitude, outcast attitude,
Yeah.
that should have just
Yeah,
gone. That
yeah.
should have disappeared. I get it. You were raised as an outcast. At the same time, we didn't need that anymore. And then my other one, and it really surprisingly, I love the new mechanic to the game. I love how it actually felt something new. I didn't use it all that much because it didn't seem to really be all that needed. The skill point system. And I know
Hmm.
they're probably going to get some backlash from somebody, but Rusty, you were in a party with me watching my screen, and at one point you were like, Thacker, you've got 10 skill points. Why are you using that? Legitimately, the
Yeah, I
skill
get
tree,
yeah.
it wasn't needed for me.
I guess that is an interesting point of like that's an interesting point of contention just because I think that there were good things in the skill tree, but I will say that this skill tree, and I know again this is going to sound like a broken record because of how many times we've ragged on Cyberpunk in the past, but it felt like this skill tree had a lot of same issues that Cyberpunk did, where it wasn't really skills that you were getting at least most of the time. It more or less felt like it was like stat increases.
Yeah.
Like okay, you gain this ability, and then every time from here on out, when you invest in this tree, it more or less just increases that ability. And like the special abilities were cool. I used a lot of the medic ability where it was, when you drink this potion, you constantly regain health every second, and I maxed that
Yeah.
out, and I got to a point where I was essentially God at that point. And that was fucking awesome.
And that's the
But
thing. I was using more of the beast, like the mech system, where it was easier to break off pieces for crafting. And I only did that because of the simple fact of I did not want to spend 30 minutes taking down a machine just for like 3 parts.
yeah.
So I mean, those are my two gripes. Rusty, what about you, man? What are your gripes
So
on
I
this one?
think Matt was in the party when this happened. My gripe is performance related.
Oh yes,
So
yes.
first things first, and I want to talk about this because I don't know that the three of us, and really Kyle, I know Kyle's played only a little bit of the game, and he probably hadn't seen a lot of this. Did anybody else think that the pop in this game was a little excessive?
It was jarring. I've had
Oh,
moments in cutscenes where there was some really weird pop-ins going on, and it was very distracting.
Yeah, like there would be a cutscene where it would like load on Aloy's face, and like everything in the
Yeah,
background would just pop in. And
yeah,
and listen, like we'll be consistent because obviously the elephant in the room that we're going to be talking about soon is Elden Ring, and Elden Ring does have that similar issue with a little bit of pop in. There is an issue there as
yeah.
well. I just don't know how that's an issue in 2022. You know, like that's so many of the issues that happen when it comes to game performance nowadays. I chalk it up to I don't know, or what I end up saying is I don't know how these end up happening, especially in this year. We have the technology we have. How do these issues still exist? Especially when the console, like the PS5, is as powerful as it is. When the Series X is as powerful as it is, it doesn't seem like that should be happening. So the pop in was bad, but my real gripe was about 3 or 4 times in this game, and Matt was present for the first one.
Hmm.
I hit some bad frame rate drops. I'm talking it was a smooth 60, and then all of a sudden it dipped into like the teens, like 15, 16, 17 frames per second. Uh, and I had to like reload my game to get it back to 60. Now, again, you might say, well, over the course of a 19-hour, playthrough, that's not, 3 times that's happening, that's not that bad. Well, but the thing is that you don't forget that. You don't forget that, and then the moment it happens a second time, you begin to think, okay, how regular of an occurrence is this going to be? And that always, when I was in the middle of battles, well, especially when things were going crazy and there were flashing lights everywhere and there's so much
Yeah.
going on that the PS5 has to account for on screen, I'm sitting there going, okay, is this going to be where the game crashes? Okay, is this going to be where the frame rate drops to 15 and I die and have to redo all of this again? You know, it just, the performance, I wish it had been a little bit better. When the game is running, it runs beautifully. It looks really, really good, and it's one of the best looking games on the PS5. And that's not bad when you consider that games like Demon Souls, Spider-Man Miles Morales, and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart all look fantastic on the PS5. So I think that performance-wise, it was really good for the most part. But that 10% of the time, or that 5% of the time when it wasn't great, it was pretty rough. The pop in was pretty rough. The frame rate drops were pretty rough. Thankfully, it didn't end up costing me that much in the long run. But performance wise, especially when I know studios like Gorilla, how they have everything at their disposal that they need. It's inexcusable. And now that doesn't mean that I hated the game. I absolutely love this game. The question of is it the front runner for game of the year? Well, when it first came out and Elden Ring didn't exist, I would have said absolutely. Now with Elden Ring out, it's a pretty good topic of conversation. At the very least, I think if this game comes in as the second best game that comes out this year, that's pretty fucking good because this game is pretty damn awesome. So that is Horizon Forbidden West, and that is going to do it for this episode of Side Mission. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Side Mission Pod. You can follow me, Thacker, and Matt on there as well. For the boys, I'm Rusty Ellis. Thanks for listening.